Hello. Welcome everyone. My name is Maria Brandsøy and I represent Ocean Highway Cluster. And for those of you who don't know us, we are a maritime cluster representing companies from across the hydrogen value chain, from energy producer to end user. And today, I'm here to moderate this Blue Talk on hydrogen-based fuels, and more specifically, we are talking about hydrogen and ammonia today. And over the last year, we know that hydrogen has gained a lot of attention, recently even more because of some of the alarming climate reports we have been seeing. And we know that the maritime sector is responsible for a lot of the emissions, and that we need to do something to reduce them. So today, we are lucky to have 5 great panelists with us here today to share some of their knowledge on the topic. So the first one I want to introduce you to is Magnus Ankerstrand. If you could just come up. Magnus is the CEO of Yara Clean Ammonia, and I'm sure you know Yara. But Magnus and his team, they will build on Yara's history as an ammonia producer to produce carbon-free ammonia, 2 different segments, but also to the maritime sector. So I'm going to give the floor to Magnus for a while to give us an introduction and to set some context to this Blue Talk. So the stage is yours.
Thank you. And thanks a lot for the invitation to come here and speak today. We've been speaking a lot last year about ammonia, and the attention to ammonia and hydrogen has increased dramatically. And last year, I would say we did a lot what I would call dinner speeches. It was all based on the climate, the Paris Accord, the green transition, and I think what we're doing now is try to transition a little bit from dinner speeches to real action, because I think that's what we need. Compared to last year, when we all talked about the green transition, what has happened? We've had a supply chain crisis, we've had an energy crisis, and now on top of that we have a full-blown war in Europe as well, which has significant impacts on our business, and I'm sure the business for most of you. And what it shows us, to some extent at least, is the context and the magnitude of the change that we will need to have if we are to reach the climate targets by 2030. We see that now, the impact of significant energy sources disappearing, others coming but coming too late, and we see the disruptions that they create. And what it tells us is that this transition, war or no war, will not be an easy ride. It will be very, very difficult. There's no doubt about that. And hence my from dinner speeches to real action. But what do we know? We know that the IMO targets are there for 2050. We know that there's a chance that they'll be sharpened as well. And I think everybody here knows that what applies towards 2050 matters for investments being made today, particularly in the shipping sector. I think the other thing that we know is that the available zero carbon fuels are there. Hydrogen, ammonia, we know that it works. Yes, there is technology that need to be developed. Yes, there are things that need to come in place. But technologically, it's not extremely challenging. It is something that we will know how to do. The challenge is timing and how do we move from dinner speeches to action. How do we actually make it happen? As I mentioned, the technology, we will manage that, I have no doubt. There are a lot of challenges, but there are a lot of great companies out there as well that will be able to tackle that. With regards to ammonia, logistics are already there. Infrastructure is already there. Production is already there. Not at the scale that we need for ammonia to replace carbon-based fuels as a shipping fuel, but certainly enough to tackle the transition and the first pilots and the first start of zero carbon fuels. So that's in place as well. I think what we need going forward is focus on the entire value chain and collaboration across the value chain. Because now it's been a lot of focus on production plants. You hear about green ammonia projects, blue ammonia projects popping up everywhere. But the challenge will be, how do you make this into a real value chain? One step that we've done, announced just this Friday with Hussein, will be on stage here later, is a technical solution with bunkering barges for the actual bunkering of vessels. And that's a great step. And we need more collaboration like that across the value chain to also fix all the other elements that need to come in place, whether that is safety, bunkering routines, logistics, all the different pieces of the puzzle that need to come together. So the big question is, how do we make all these things happen in parallel? And I think for that, we need a market. And to have a market, there needs to be a willingness to pay. There needs to be incentives. There need to be incentives to pay. And for that to happen, we will need governments, the IMO, and others to step in to make that change. Because the hard fact of the matter is that unless the price, including CO2 taxes or whatever is added to it for fossil fuels, increases, there will not be willingness to pay for clean fuels. There will be pilots, there will be small scale and companies who venture into with a vessel here and there. But to get this to a large scale, we need those incentives. And that means carbon tax, preferably a global one. Probably unrealistic, but we need at least the leading countries, Norway, the EU, the UK, to take that step and introduce a carbon tax. And why do we need that? Because that will create a level playing field. That means that the cost can be passed on through the value chain where it can be absorbed. The alternative is an unlevel playing field and a significant delay in the transition, and a world where some companies and some countries are exposed to a significant burden and some are not. But we believe that it can be solved, and we're very happy to be a part of this panel today with other representatives representing the value chain, and together we will work to make this transition happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Magnus. I think we are ready for a discussion now. But I want to start with a few questions for you. But while we talk, I would like the other panelists to just find your way on stage. And we will get to you shortly. Maybe you can just stand there. And you already covered why ammonia would be a viable option for shipping. And since Yara is one of the global leaders when it comes to ammonia production, I want to go a bit deeper. And one of the things that everything's wondering about is the volume. And I'm sure that your team has done a lot of analysis when it comes to the market potential. So I wonder, how big do you think the maritime market is going to be? And secondly, how much of that are you and Yara covering?
That's a very, very good question. I think if you look at the total market potential, you just translate whatever is consumed in fuel today and translate that into ammonia, it's going to be 500 million tons market, which is, just in comparison, the total production today is 170 million tons. The available traded market is 20 million tons. So it's massive, but it's not all going to be ammonia. It's not, which just tells me that there's plenty of room for hydrogen, batteries, a lot of different other fuels as well. But it's going to take time. It's going to take time to scale up production to that level. We have a 25% market share today. Our target is to remain as relevant and have that same market share. And our focus now is it's not the 20 million tons that the market might be in 2035. It is the 10,000, the 500,000 tons that will be the next 5, 6, 7 years. Because that, if you don't get that proof of concept working, this will not happen. And I think so that our focus is really to center our projects towards concrete collaborations, concrete pilots that will consume ammonia, and then focus on establishing the market. And the market eventually will be what it will be.
Okay. Yeah. Another thing that I know concerns several is the price. Could you say anything about the development of the price? And do you ever think that we will break even with the price of marine fuel?
Again, that depends on what the price of marine fuel is, doesn't it? If the cost of the CO2 emissions of the marine fuel is factored in, and of course depending on what kind of price is put on that, ammonia could be competitive with marine fuel already today. I think the other element which is important is technology development, because I mean there are different ways of developing both blue and green ammonia, and not go into detail on all different types, but if you take green ammonia, which is probably the most difficult one from a cost perspective, there's no doubt that the development potential for electrolyzer efficiency and hence the cost is significant. And also, of course, is very much dependent on the price of renewable electricity, which, if we do things right and you get the amount of development that you need, will come down as well. So it depends on a lot of different factors. We should be careful comparing what fuel prices are today and what the cost of ammonia is today with what it will look like in the future, because I think there are a lot of developments that will happen there. But it needs to be cost competitive, there's no doubt about that.
Absolutely, yeah. I guess it's going to be dependent on a range of factors. And I want to stay on the ammonia topic for a while, but move over to André Risholm. You have very ambitious plans and are developing a range of ammonia-fueled vessels. And just firstly, why did you decide on ammonia as fuel?
Well, of course, that was based on a long time of study and analysis. I will not bore you with the details from that, but really it's the first question is, are you going for a carbon-free solution or are you going for a so-called carbon neutral? And in my head, the answer must be carbon-free to really solve the issues. And then you really have 4 different options that are all hydrogen derived: compressed hydrogen, liquid hydrogen, LOHC, and ammonia. And between those, for deep sea shipping, which is really what I wanted to focus on, is what can be a solution for deep sea shipping. And then from there, deduct that back to what can we make work commercially today and start developing projects to get the floating proof on the water. And between those 4 options, ammonia, when you bunker it in a port, not at the factory gate perhaps, but when you bunker it in a port, I am certain that the price of ammonia will be lower than the other alternatives, especially comparing with LOHC if you look at the round-trip efficiency. And then, of course, it's much easier to handle. It has a higher volumetric energy density, which is very important for displacement vessels, cargo vessels. And yeah, that was some of the good arguments for ammonia.
Yeah.
But of course, it's a long list with pros and cons. There are cons as well. But the conclusion from my side was ammonia is the solution for deep sea shipping.
But you mentioned deep sea shipping, but what about other types of segments, other types of ship? Are there certain ship types that are better suited for ammonia or others?
I would say anytime you're going to transport something heavy or in a big volume a certain distance, then you need the qualities of ammonia, and that goes all the way down to quite small segments. I mean, our most well-known project is Viridis bulk carriers, that we are in a partnership with Navigar Logistics, fully integrated short sea bulk owner, and Mosvold's Rederi, which is a financial shipping company. And there we're in the short sea bulk space. So a lot of short legs, but designing the vessels for similar operational range as the fleet today, so about 3,000 nautical miles, and quite small vessels, but still very fit for ammonia.
And when we talk about hydrogen and ammonia, we often talk about the chicken and egg situation. Which is going to come first? Is it the infrastructure or is it the market? And that's a discussion that tends to slow things down. How are you planning on tackling the chicken and egg?
Well, first of all, ever since we founded the company, one of the first things I did was to contact Yara. because they are the largest trader in the world, huge market share, of course a Norwegian company, and especially in the northern European part, they have total hegemony over ammonia. So to really engage with them closely, and then of course my focus was initially on the ships, but it very soon became apparent, like Magnus said, that the early parts of the value chain are already in place. Yeah. There's already a bulk shipping network for ammonia. Production is there. It will become greener, but production is there. But we came fast to a development in the ships where we already saw that, hey, what's the interface? What's the bunkering interface? And we didn't see any technology companies working on that. So about 1 year ago, we started two things. We started a company called Sane Fuel Solutions together with partners Econnect Energy, which are gas and liquid transfer technology experts from LNG business. And we started a consortium project called the Ammonia Fuel Bunkering Network, where Yara was an important partner, along with some specific locations, safety experts, and so on. And we were awarded a very important start funding from Norwegian government green platform. So that was really key to kickstart the development, to get funding for the first unit. And then we have built on that together with Yara, and that's the exciting news that Magnus shared now on Friday, to really start building out this fuel bunkering network, because you need a network.
I think Magnus had a comment to that.
Just to add on the chicken and egg, I think there are two additional things that are extremely important. First of all, you need the proof of concept, right? You need the engines, you need to show that you can actually do the bunkering, you need certification, all these things. That needs to happen first. I think everybody agrees that before you scale this dramatically. But the second thing is that you need a market. Today, we have our first project in, we've started to build it. It's a small scale project. We have the second one, which is larger, probably announced relatively soon. So we have enough to fuel our pilots and the different ventures that we're a part of, and that's important for the proof of concept. But for this to take off in a significant way, you need that market. I mean, now in Norway we have a 2,000 kroner CO2 tax, maybe. But maybe it's not good enough. That's you can't make an investment decision on politicians saying that we might do something, and by the way, we might change our mind, because then our entire business case is gone. And the same thing applies for the vessel owners, right? It can't be, there might be a CO2 tax there into the future, so you better make some investments now to be prepared. It doesn't work that way. I think you need very, very firm policy to say that this will happen. And then you need to back that with positive incentives as well, and say that, okay, so the vessel owners that are the first will be compensated through a contract for difference or similar to take down the risk of being first. But without that market, and without government stepping in to create that market, it will take a long time. I think it will still come, but it will take a long time.
Thank you very much. And then I think we need to move over to hydrogen for a while. Robert Haugen, you're the CEO of Hexagon Purus Maritime. And Hexagon Purus in the maritime sector is mostly known for their storage solutions with lightweight composite tanks. And they are also one of the few companies who's actually delivered a product to a vessel, a hydrogen vessel, that is launched. The Sea Change, a passenger ferry in the US. And I know this was a bit before your time, Robert, but could you say something about the process you went through, the key learnings, the barriers, working with the Sea Change?
Yes, I can. So yesterday I talked with the crew over there working on the vessel. The vessel today is ready. It's approved by US Coast Guard and ABS in the United States. So this vessel is basically ready, and it has our tank and our fuel system in it. It has been delayed mostly because of regulations. They needed to go several safety rounds before getting to the point they are today. But obviously all the learnings and what they have been doing has been very positive for us, but I think also for the industry, that it takes the product and the totality further. So we are actually building on a lot of the feedback that project gave. So yeah. I can mention as well that they have been successfully fueling that vessel now 7 times, which is also, we've already been talking a little bit about fueling, and yeah, everything looks good.
It's very interesting. And of course, I guess it's very valuable experience to bring with you forward. But you mentioned that barriers, one of the barriers were the lack of regulations. And we do have Mark Darley with us from Lloyd's, which is a marine classification society. It's a very complex process to build a vessel today without a hydrogen-based fueled vessel today without any regulations. Why don't we have it yet? And when do you think they will be in place?
Well, thanks, Maria, and thanks for the introduction. I appreciate it. Without my picture, it looks like I've just stormed the stage here, but I was invited, so.
I missed you. Oh, sorry about that.
So just to answer your question, I think look, let's look back. We're an organisation 260 plus years old, and a big part of our job is to facilitate bringing in new technology and bringing it into the industry safely. So that we can go from these pilots and we can scale it to the kind of quantity, with the 100,000 commercial ships that we've got operating out there today that ultimately need to be replaced into low and zero carbon shipping. So we've gone through 4 energy transitions in that period of time, and obviously introduced a huge amount of new technology. Now, as you rightly say, when you look at the case of hydrogen and ammonia, the IGF code and statutory regulations don't actually account for using it as a fuel. That being said, we've been working on pilot projects with many people on the stage actually today to understand with those first movers, to understand firstly how to approve those particular projects, but then also how we can take that learning and turn that into regulation that means that we can get that scale. And that's important because I think if you look at the marine industry as a whole, I've been in the industry for a long time, and we're an industry that firstly is quite reactive, or historically has been quite reactive. And we're also an industry that, if we're honest, we like being told what to do. Particularly when it comes to regulation. Most regulation is very prescriptive, and it tells you exactly when you need to comply. And here we are with a myriad of options, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's ammonia, whether it's whatever it might be, and no prescriptive regulation in place. So companies are finding it very difficult in that uncertain environment to make real capital investment decisions on their new builds in terms of which fuel or fuel flexibility. But taking the learning, and it does take a long time, and if you take a project actually that we announced this week with Yara, which is the first, what we believe will be the first deep sea ammonia fueled VLCC. So these are big vessels powered by ammonia. That has taken 3.5 years from the concept to the announcement that we made this week and the contract that we've signed for those vessels to be in service in the water in 2025.
Is that the Castor Initiative? That's
the Castor Initiative. Yeah. With Yara, with MISC, with Singapore MPA, with MANES at Lloyd's Register as well. So it's about getting people around the table, getting smart people around smart tables, as I say, to do the design screening, do the hazard, do the HAZOPs. Now that can't be, it's not a sustainable solution. We do need to take that learning and turn it into prescriptive requirements. And to do that, that's why it's important to have not just the classification societies like Lloyd's, but also to have the flag states, because ultimately when these ships are sailing around the world and turning up in different countries, it's the flag states and the port states that will accept them into those different geographies. But I completely agree, just in final, with Magnus. In that 260-year period, an introduction of all that new technology, it is not the technology that is holding us back here and the barrier. Lloyd's Register has developed a tool called the Zero Carbon Fuel Monitor tool, and that looks at readiness levels. It looks at technology readiness. It looks at the commercial readiness, i.e. how much is the fuel going to be and how available is it. But it also looks at the community readiness. And by community readiness, certainly on the case when we talk about nuclear, we look at nuclear-powered ships turning up in different countries. But when we also talk about community readiness, we're talking about the crew's ability to handle and bunker some of these fuels. And some people think, that the iteration from going from LNGF, which is probably our most recent learning, and we do have prescriptive rule requirements and experience, to hydrogen ammonia is just the next iteration. Well, absolutely it is not. It is much more complicated and it is much more in depth to make that transition. But that transition is about making sure that we also invest in the people and we also invest in the knowledge and education to make sure that we can transport and handle these fuels as well.
Yeah. And you also work a lot with handling risk, as you told. And risk and hydrogen and ammonia are both associated with risk. How do we manage to do this process safely?
Well, as I say, at the moment, it's very hard yards, as we would say in England.
Sorry?
It's very hard yards. It's getting people into hazard workshops. As I say, it's taken 3.5 years to get an ammonia-fueled VLCC into production. You can imagine the amount of time that our teams have spent in workshops looking at specific fuel supply systems, looking at things like fire detection systems. Ammonia compared to LNG, ammonia goes down, LNG goes up. So then that completely changes the design of fire detection and fire suppression systems. But it requires that C word that everybody now knows over the last 3 years, which is collaboration. It requires us all to get together and really walk through these challenges as an industry, but as well walk through these challenges, as Magnus says, as a supply chain, rather than just looking at these things in isolation. And we really welcome the announcements from the IMO last week that say, they're now considering, but it's positive, they're considering not only looking at from bunker manifold to weight, but looking at the whole well to weight, because really to make this a success, those are the kind of conversations that we need to be having.
Are there any comments to that before we move on? Johan?
Yeah, so actually adopting the technology and actually understanding all the interfaces and doing the full system integration on a vessel is crucial to actually understand what challenges lies ahead. And the workshop-based methodology very quickly becomes, day-to-day business. Even though there are no prescriptive rules, there is a best practice quite soon developed. So, and by that, there will be a regulation probably coming later on once we have a lot of history and experience of the utilization of the technology, like the IGF code, for instance.
Yep.
It took roughly 50 to 20 years before it actually became a regulation.
And that builds a bit on the next question. By the way, Johan Burgen from PowerCell, we haven't introduced you yet.
No, thank you.
One of the leading manufacturers of heavy-duty fuel cells, but have also entered the maritime market. And how is that with your experience? I guess it's a great advantage to take that with you into the maritime sector, both with regulation, safety. Could you tell us something about that?
Yeah, something which is very important to tell about fuel cells is that they have proven to be viable in other segments. So for instance, in cars, in buses, in all types of land-based applications, it's a matter of actually packaging them for the marine market. So we just do a marine adaptation. Safety-wise, we package them for the specific interfaces on a vessel. And simply, that is possible to do, and we are actually doing it right now. So we are delivering our first project, and it's in a megawatt scale, so it's roughly 3 megawatts of fuel cell power. So it's actually happening.
Yeah.
And we are actually doing those workshops. We are sort of scratching our heads and interacting with all these parties.
Yeah.
Whether it's ammonia as a fuel or other, it's still the hydrogen molecule that will enter into something.
Absolutely.
And
But I wonder, while we are talking about fuel cell, could you just educate us a bit? In what kind of ships do you see a fuel cell being applied? Is it mostly in inland or coastal, or do you see fuel cell being used in the deep sea segment as well?
obviously, it would be silly to say that we would have a deep sea operation of a fully fledged fuel cell solution from day one. We will have segments like the short sea shipping, RoPax ferries, inland waterways for sure. There is announcements of a tug being built in US for inland waterways with fuel cells. So it's really, there are many segments where actually pure hydrogen actually could also interact with ammonia in a sort of combined power solution, depending on your dynamics, power requirements, and so forth.
Yeah. And also for specifically the last year, we have seen the combustion engine entering the market. We have both ABC and we have Bergen Engines are establishing their own hydrogen engines. I know you have ammonia engines, but hydrogen engines. Do you have any thoughts on that? And I guess this is your time to shine, though. What's the advantage with fuel
obviously
cell?
the market is really big. I mean,
Yeah.
there are so many molecules that will have to be transferred into ammonia molecules or to hydrogen molecules.
Yeah.
So there will be place for all solutions. And so that was my really pragmatic answer to that one.
Yeah.
But obviously there will be first
Very fair
uptakers and so on.
answer.
Yeah. Are you good with that? Yeah.
That's fine. I didn't know what to expect on that one.
No.
Okay, but I think we'll go back to Robert for a while. You're also an equipment supplier. And I feel that suppliers, and I guess that includes you, Johan, sometimes you talk about the product as if you can pick it off the shelf and put it in the boat. But at the same time, we don't have that many pilot projects yet. So how would you describe the overall maturity of the technology?
So in the Hexagon family, we, as with Johan, we already did this on land and on rail, buses, heavy-duty trucks. So we know the technology. We have the factory to make the tanks for the compressed hydrogen. We are also working very closely with Lloyds and DNV and Sjöfartsdirektorat and the US Coast Guard. So I think also, as I think was you mentioning it, Johan, that the process that we are doing, it's obviously there for a reason, and all the hazards and all the work we are doing now is also preparing us for actually delivery. But again, we have a lot of projects that is going on now that already that has been announced yesterday, a couple of projects, and things are moving ahead. So I would say we can deliver. We have the factories. We have the technology. Yeah, but talking about integration, we are working close with PowerCell and other fuel cell suppliers, the shipyards, government. So I think we are all working together to try to get this ready as soon as possible. So. Yeah. And from our standpoint and from many others, it's not technology that needs to be brought forward. It's technology that is available, maybe for different application or at least approved for different usage. But I'm quite confident that soon we will see a lot of projects on water. So.
How about in 10 years? How do you think the picture is going to look in 10 years from now? We have a lot of targets for 2030, so we have a lot of work to do until 2030. So how is the technology going to look? How efficient is your fuel cell going to be?
I hope it's more efficient. What has happened really in the last 5 years of fuel cells is remarkable, I would say, in terms of development of not only the fuel cell, but also the components supply into the fuel cell technology. That happens everywhere. We get new catalyst materials. We get the whole supply chain is developing once there is projects ongoing and once there is implementation. Then we get the whole momentum of the industry.
Yeah.
So it will be progressed substantially. But we have to prepare also for that progression. So we have to have technology that is adaptable to this transition. So we might have to swap out our modules and make them, serviceable and updatable, so to speak. So we are up to the latest and greatest in the market.
Absolutely. I want to stay on the maturity of the technology, but move over to you two again with ammonia. And you cover different parts of the value chain, but maybe Magnus, you can take the first one, and then Andre, the bunkering and integration to the vessel. So how is because we know it's a different value chain and a different infrastructure when it comes to ammonia. How is the maturity there now?
Yeah, no, I think, the maturity of ammonia production technology is very, very high. We've produced, the back end, the synthesis loop, as it's called. We've been doing that for more than 100 years, and it's gradually been improved and made more efficient. But it's basically the same.
And also green
technology.
ammonia.
Yes, correct. I mean, actually, the way ammonia was produced initially was with electrolysis and green, and then oil and gas came in. Same as energy efficiency, really, but much cheaper, and that over time overtook electrolysis. But I think in terms of scaling it up fast, you also have blue ammonia, which is another important component, and there as well. Technology is already there. The autothermal reformer, that's already being used in the methanol industry, and we already capture CO2 from our steam methane reformer, to be a bit technical. But so that's there, and of course, one important element there is, of course, the storage part, which we also know how to do. It's being done today, but it's a question of scaling it up, which is key. And of course, over time, making it more efficient. Green ammonia, the technology development required on electrolysis is bigger, but I think the crucial step is on the green is to get enough renewable electricity, because that's at the end of the day what matters. The electrolysis technology, that will come, but when you think about the amounts of renewable energy you will need to replace fossil fuels and also fossil-based ammonia production, those are significant amounts. I mean, our project in Porsgrunn, Herøya, is 500 megawatts alone, 7 terawatt hours. It's enormous amount of energy, and so that's going to be critical. That's why I think we will need both green and blue in a transition. But the technology, yes, there's a lot of things that need to happen, a lot of work to do, but that's not the Achilles heel. The Achilles heel is the ability to generate that electricity and the ability to create the market.
And I was about to say the location, but you probably got that figured out.
Sorry, what?
I was about to say the location, but I think you got that figured out.
Yeah.
And I know the bunkering is one of the biggest issues in this infrastructure. Could you tell us about the maturity from bunkering to entering the vessel?
Yeah. Yes, I will, but before I do that, I hope you excuse me, because I really wanted to answer the question that you asked Johan there about the next 10 years.
I didn't see you there.
I didn't put my hand up, I was just thinking, and then I used my chance now.
Welcome, you're welcome.
Well, next 10 years, that's 2032. There are about 100,000 ships in the world that are large enough to have an IMO number. That means that every year there's built between 3,000 and 4,000 vessels, and for the past 10-15 years there has been a structural under-ordering. So I believe that once we start going into these new solutions, you will actually have larger orders per year than the 3,000-4,000. So in 2032, I think that everything is really lining up to have thousands of vessels on the water and on order that in my head is going to run on ammonia, but let's say the new solution then to be a bit objective. But those numbers are so big, thousands of vessels every year. So once the shift starts, then it can move quite quickly, and that's a good reason to be optimistic.
Okay, I think Johan had the first.
I just had a comment on the build. Yeah, and if you look at the 2010 build boom of container vessels, you can see that it was a huge boom in building in particularly China, and those will probably reach their end of life roughly in 2030, 2035 possibly. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be a huge, replacement scheme or retrofit scheme or just cut up scheme in order to help this transition. That's a great opportunity for new technology.
Absolutely. And Mark, you had a comment as well?
Well, yeah, just to add on to Andre's point there. So yeah, 100,000 ships in the water with an IMO number. If you look at that fleet of 100,000 today, about 1,100 of those 100,000 actually are using an alternative source of fuel. So it's only about 1% of the 100,000, obviously. If you look at what has been ordered in what has been a 10-year high of ordering, that percentage goes up to 23%. So we go from 1% to 23%. Now, 23% of what's been ordered is about 910 vessels that have currently been ordered. Now, the way that we see this is a bit of an S-curve, to answer your original question. By 2030, it's probably 5% in total of that 100,000. Then by sort of late 2030, around 27%, and you only really start getting up there when we get closer to 2050. So you see this kind of S-curve. Now, there's some interesting things happening in the new construction markets at the moment as a result of the ordering boom. As I say, the market has gone from the summer 2020, when we were in an 8-year low of new construction volumes, to where we are today, where we're at a 15-year high in terms of new construction contracting. Now, what that has led to is actually it's created this buffer, because even if you wanted to go and order an ammonia or a hydrogen fuel vessel in major shipyards in China and Korea, you couldn't do it. Particularly in Korea now, you're looking at slots for 2025, ships in operation 2026, 2027. Yeah. Now, ironically, that's given us all a buffer to really think about and clear up some of the uncertainty that we need to make. But on the flip side of that, 2030 doesn't go away. It doesn't delay itself. So, what we've given ourselves is just a bit of time just to mature, not necessarily the technical conversation, but the commercial readiness and the community readiness side of the conversation in terms of where and how much we're going to bunker these fuels.
Absolutely. Robert?
Yeah, just to add to that, we see the same number, of course, and to go after the new build market. But what we have also identified is retrofit and hybrid drive. So you don't have to go 100% on a new build of a certain operation. There are many aspects in between as well, and there's many already new vessels that is starting to prepare for these new fuel systems. So
yeah, and that's an important aspect as well. And I guess with hydrogen-based ships, it might be a bit harder to retrofit them than with ammonia, probably, even though it's no.
What was the question?
I think
hydrogen will not be difficult, because you are essentially generating energy. So if you have a diesel electric vessel and you have space for hydrogen,
yeah, space. That was what I was thinking of. Yeah,
but it all depends on the operation and the vessel.
Yeah,
so
of course. Mark, you had a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to, I completely agree and with what you were saying there, and the conversation is shifting. Certainly, what we're seeing, and it's great. Completely agree with Magnus. 2-3 years ago, the industry was talking about decarbonisation and digitalisation. Our aim, like Magnus and everybody else, I think, on the stage, is to get ships in the water. But really now the conversation is shifting away from decarbonisation to complete life cycle analysis.
Yeah.
You talk about the number of ships that potentially need replacing. One side of the argument is it doesn't make sense to replace those ships because of the carbon emitted to replace 10, 15, 20,000 ships in 10 years' time. So the conversation has shifted into that total life cycle impact and emissions from a very sort of maritime focused bunker manifold to wake conversation around decarbonisation.
Did you have a comment to that, Johan?
Yeah, just an obvious comment that for the greater good of Mother Earth, I think we, of course, have to look at the retrofit options. There must be partners that we work with to realize this opportunity as well. Building new is, of course, very energy intense, and you pull a lot of material into the process. So it goes without saying we have a huge opportunity there as well.
Magnus?
Just to add to that, I think on the ammonia side, I think we see new build as being the most likely option and the most sort of prevalent option for uptake of ammonia as a fuel. And one reason simply is that if you think about the amount of ammonia that will be required and the time it will take to make that, it's barely enough for the new builds, right? To actually supply them with the fuel. So I think. And of course, if it takes off, you might see retrofit and so on later on. But I think at least the economics of designing the vessel from the beginning as fit for ammonia are more promising than retrofitting on the ammonia side.
Do you have a comment for that, Andre?
Oh, I fully agree with that. See exactly the same picture. Designing a vessel from scratch. Built around the new power system, and especially also taking into account technical barriers for safety from the start, and really designing it as a ammonia-powered, let's say, cargo vessel that we are working on instead of just a cargo vessel with a new type of power system. It's simply going to be a much better ship that way. And to be honest, I see exactly the same picture on the other technologies as well. And retrofit is hard. I've worked for a ship owner and I've been involved in some retrofit conversion project, and that's always a nightmare, to be honest. So I believe strongly in the new building case because it will be better ships and it will make more sense capital-wise and on the investment side, making it more efficient. That's my opinion. You will certainly see retrofits, but I think if you look at where the large volumes of the new fuels are going, I think they're going to go predominantly to new buildings.
Do you disagree?
Yes.
Yes,
No, it's-
finally.
No, it's for hydrogen at least. I think maybe it would be a lower barrier to go there. Obviously, if you're thinking 100%, I will probably agree, but you will have some safety in your system. If you have a vessel that already works, you can try out in small scale, and then you can scale it up as well. Especially in some of the operations, maybe PSVs or vessels where you have space on deck and high up and so on, that actually hydrogen for retrofit can be or hybrid drive at least, so that you have hydrogen for running the hotel on the vessel or winches or take some of the energy that is required on board the vessel. I think it's a shorter way to go there than having to rely on the complete design of the vessel.
Okay. I think we then have André and Johan, and then I think we need to move on to the next question.
We just have to continue this discussion. It's a panel, so it's good to have some discussion and
Of
not
course.
only nodding our heads. So the space on the cargo deck on a PSV is there for a reason. You're going to use it for cargo. So if you start placing tanks there and fuel cells there, especially things that can blow up if something falls down, then you're making a worse ship, to put it like that. And we can do that on ammonia as well, of course, do exactly the same thing, but you're making a worse PSV, and the job for the PSV is to do offshore logistics, and then it needs to be green as well. That's my opinion. The ships of tomorrow needs to be as good or better than the ships today, and I only see that on new building, to be honest. Those retrofit cases will be good proof of concept, maybe some life extension like you talked about, but to really see a bright future here, I think it's new building.
Johan?
Yeah, good. We're finally getting somewhere, right? Just commenting on there is of course an opportunity to replace generators on board, auxiliary generators for hotel load. So that might be the first step for the long ocean-going vessels. But just apart from the ocean-going vessels, as I said, there's been so many segments that you can actually start with just pure hydrogen, if you want. As I said in the beginning as well, we are fuel agnostic, so we can work with any as long as it's a hydrogen molecule coming into our system. But that said, there are so many. If you look at reefer containers, for instance, when your Maersk is loading containers on their ship, you have a hotel load fluctuating, and you might want to have a stabilized EDI indexing or whatever, and then you actually could shave that off with a zero emission solution. As well as for the Fit for 55 regulation is coming into Europe now with the shore power need. There you can have an onboard solution with a containerized solution as well. So there's many incentives now coming in the market for this.
And then I have a few questions I just want to touch upon before we are almost done here. Quite a big question and not necessarily easy to answer, but we know there are a lot of choices and a lot of uncertainties for today's ship owners and operators. And there are many different fuels, as we have touched upon, and everyone has pros and cons. And if there's a ship operator or owner that needs to renew their vessel or fleet in the next coming years, what kind of approach would you recommend them to take? And that's kind of based on the discussion we've had now with kind of, are we going all in, or what would you recommend?
I say as
If someone came to you.
The sailing coach of the 2008 Olympics team that I met the other day, he said, you just remember three things when you're in stress. So he said, what three things are we going to remember for our sailing now? He wrote them down. Go for it. So just make it happen. Make implementation happen, and then we'll find out the details and we'll solve it.
I guess you would agree. You already done it.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. But to answer your question, it would depend on who asks. Personally, I think that, let's say, commercial viability for any green fuel, and I'm focused on ammonia, commercial viability will happen at different times on the timeline depending on the type of vessel and the type of trade. So like I said in the beginning, we started in the segments where we didn't have a fleet on the water. We looked at it and we said, what do we think we can make work commercially in the early phase? And really, the vision, of course, is to decarbonize deep sea shipping. That's the big volumes. I think some of those segments might come quite early, but a lot of those long legs, very heavy cargo, that will take some time, I believe. So for, let's say, a large bulk carrier, I would probably go for something ammonia ready, but make it truly ammonia ready and not just a stamp.
Yeah.
But for a vessel that carries more expensive cargo, maybe you could make it work earlier. For example, a container ship like Maersk is doing with methanol could work with ammonia early as well.
Magnus?
No, I very much agree. I mean, the challenge for a vessel owner is you have to de-risk this somehow, right? You know that there is regulation out there, but you don't know exactly when it will come, or you don't know exactly how it will impact the investments you want to do this year or next year, and you just need to de-risk where you can. I think, as André mentioned, ammonia-ready vessels. That's a very good start. Those are available. DNV and probably Lloyd's others have established classification rules, etc. for that. And I think they just need to keep their options open as much as you can. And then I think, again, depending on what you're shipping, to the extent you can work with the value chain, work with the cargo owners, and see whether there is a willingness to pay, whether there's a business case there for somebody actually wanting green shipment, right? Container is one. Of course, if you distribute the extra costs on the iPad or the sneakers or whatever is shipped, then suddenly the cost isn't that bad. If the vessel owner has to take the entire increased fuel costs on their own, of course, it's a big investment. But I think that's what needs to happen. The car industry is the same thing. Eventually it's going to be difficult when electric cars get green steel from hydrogen-driven steel plants and so on, and then the actual shipment of the cars is done with a significant carbon footprint. That's going to be an issue. And if you take the added cost of an ammonia vessel distributed on each car shipped, the cost, we're not talking that much, right? So I think you need to think broader along the value chain.
Everything into perspective.
Yep.
Yeah. First it was Robert.
Yes. So I think going forward we need to think different from what has happened before, or how we were thinking about operations, the vessels, stopping, fueling, everything. And still, we have to agree to disagree. That I think that retrofit is, in some operation, not all, in some operations, some applications, it makes sense. And what we need to do is get this industry, or get this technology on the water, like we did with Sea Change, and there's even a vessel over here with our tanks. So we need to start building that experience and showing, and it's also mentioned training of people so that they know how to handle this and how to make it as safe as we can. But I think for anyone at least thinking about it, they should come talk with some of us, and we can show them what is already done, So, yeah.
Let's hope someone takes you up on that. Okay, Johan?
Yeah, if there are any cargo owners here, I would like to address them. Those guys also have a responsibility in this. If you look at the diesel price, for instance, in Sweden now, we have 2.8 euros a liter of diesel. Of course, it's not commercial, but it very quickly cascades down the value chain. Contracts are being quickly negotiated to accommodate for the new price levels. And I think that cargo owners have a deal in this, like IKEA, Amazon, those guys have to come on board and actually require clean transport. For us, in the Western world, so to speak, the 1/3 that have access to electricity, it will not be that much for us.
No.
In the bottom line. So clean transport is a viable solution.
Absolutely. Andrea, you had a comment?
Yeah, you know, I fully agree that cargo owners are extremely important in this shift. They are really the ones that can make it happen, and it probably needs to be cargo owners who are able to transfer the cost further down the value chain. Eventually, it ends up with the consumer. Everything ends up with the consumer, and if we decide as a society, which I hope we do, that we need decarbonized transportation and not only transportation, then we have the means to pay for it. That's no problem at all. If we look at the period of COVID now, container rates from Asia to Europe multiplied by 15. And it took a bit longer time to buy your laptop, but the price didn't increase that much, I believe. So it's no problem. To change to these fuels is not going to multiply the cost of transport by 15. Much, much, much less. And now we have a recent example on how that looks, and it looks fine. So, yeah.
Okay, we are coming to an end, so I have one more question. It's the same questions, but it's one for each of you. It's kind of a simplistic, but we'll try. If you can mention one thing that would kind of get the ball rolling, like to really get going, what would that one thing be? Johan?
Yeah, obviously it's to dare to do the first in whatever segment you're moving. So do your assessment, of course, what do you think is right, but using the ability that you have. There is a lot of knowledge in the market, a lot of companies that can help you out, finding out what you need to do. So the buyer competence has to develop in order for you to be able to take a decision. But we can help you doing that. We take our part at PowerCell, and we have a lot of partners here today that can help you out, taking that first step.
What about you, Mark?
Yeah, so I think what I'll say is, 2-3 years ago, we were talking about 2 Ds in maritime, decarbonisation and digitalisation. And completely agree with what you say, and I can assume what these guys are going to say. So what I'll say is, look, a lot of people are talking about future fuels, and there's a lot of uncertainty, and people are delaying their decision. But today, just better use of data and understand your operation, understand what you can do to save fuel and start that decarbonisation data just from what you're getting from the ships and how you're operating the ships today. During the pandemic, the data transfers from ships to shore trebled in volume. Now, some of that is, of course, is in terms of crew volume, but some of that as well is in terms of how the industry in recent years has adopted sensor technology and is now using that data, and the smart companies using that data to understand things like weather routing and voyage planning and benchmarking their ships against other ships. So I would say use data, because that means that you can start the journey today.
Thank you. Okay, 2 more minutes, so we have to be fast.
Just building on that,
Yeah.
being open, because there is a lot of technology, but you need to think a little bit out of the box at this point. So using data and using the information that we already possess.
Being creative.
Be creative or creative.
Creative, not crazy.
What can really get the ball rolling, I believe, is a heavy European carbon tax with implementation
I was waiting for the money part to
done
come.
gradually over time, and not a very long time span either. But tax it heavily, and gravity will work. This industry has always been very quick to adapt to change once it has to. So I think that is going to get the ball rolling very fast and very big.
Okay. Magnus, famous last words?
I don't have anything better than that, I think, but I'll add to it. I mean, CO2 tax as global as possible, that's the only way, because people are not going to invest massively into this unless there's a clear incentive to do so. And if we don't, we'll have pilots, and we'll make 1 or 2 green ammonia plants, and everybody will be happy, but you will not achieve those goals. So you need clear incentives, and then you need that level playing field.
Yeah. Okay. Famous last word. Thank you very much. We are going to leave it with that. So thank you very much for the panel coming here, sharing your knowledge and insight with us. It was very interesting to listen to you. And thank you for the audience coming here today. If you want to hear more about maritime hydrogen, we are organizing a conference tomorrow at 11:30, or at lunch, and then it starts at 12. So if you're interested, go check out the website, the Norrköping website, and you find the program. So thank you very much for coming. Hope you have a great day and enjoy your Norrköping the rest of the week.